I got a question yesterday from a buddy about the Bills, and if it's rare to ever have a team that is this good offensively, 30 points a game last year. I mean, they've been one of the best offenses in the league for years and years now. To ever have a team this good on offense and have basically nobody, I mean, not nobody, but to have this little fantasy interest when you get to your drafts. A lot of Bills fans do drafts. You're going to want a Bill. And Josh Allen is obviously going to be a great pick. He's going to be one of the top 3 quarterbacks every single year. He's probably going to even be number 1, given all the rushing touchdowns that he gets. But beyond that, there are good arguments against every other player. So if you are intent on, I want one guy from my favorite team, it's not really the best offense for that, which doesn't have to relate to what their actual success on the field is. It is literally what Joe Brady is wearing on his hat.
Right. Everybody
eats can be good for their offense on the field, while also, I think this is kind of where Brandon Beane was coming from when he said this isn't fantasy football when he was on with us the day after the draft. He said that in part, that was part of his, little rant, whatever you want to call it there, about wide receiver, is this isn't fantasy football. And even though that is not at all what we were talking about that morning, does he think that is the source of the frustration about the Bills at that position is, well, it's annoying I'm annoyed you don't have anybody I can draft in fantasy. I'm annoyed that, Khalil Shakir is the best option, and amongst fantasy receivers, he's like outside the top 35, right. Honestly. Like that could have been where that was stemming from.
You got to hope that he's able to separate those things, though, and you would expect that, and I think that he's a smart enough guy to know that when we speak about fantasy football in the context that we are now about their offense, that's a very different topic than their offense as a game-winning factor, right? And
right.
I know we have never conflated those two things and combined those two things.
No, not at all.
And you would hope that your audience doesn't think that that's how you operate. So I think when you think about these fantasy things, like you see, like you said, like people don't love many of the Bills pieces anywhere. Cook's a negative, like he's going to be bad again. Like you're going to get hurt.
The regression topic about Cook, like that's the one debate because some people still like him, but you're right, it's not as universal as it was like during last season.
Right, and you see some people like the idea of drafting Coleman because they think who's going to be their red zone guy? Like it's got to be him. He's going to get force fed the ball, and then other people just don't like Coleman as a player, and so they feel conflicted about that. And so I think it's very interesting to talk about with this team because of all of that. And I don't think we should be worried about thinking people misunderstand that.
Right.
Especially the GM of the team.
Right. I think the other thing about what they are, because you're right. In Cook, the debate now is how many touchdowns is he going to score and how many is enough to make it worth a third-round pick in your fantasy draft coming up. Because he had 16 last year, and that's going to be nearly impossible to replicate. It's not impossible. I mean, he could do it, but I would bet against it. But is 8 enough? Is 9 enough? Like, if he gets 8 or 9 touchdowns this year, are you going to be happy with that? And I think you might not be as happy as you think that sounds. You might think 8 or 9 touchdowns sounds great.
You probably at the end of the year go, it was okay. He didn't hurt me, but he didn't do what I wanted.
He didn't win you games, which hey, I won a title in one league where I was going up against Allen in the New England game at the end of the season, and Allen didn't do much, but it was because James Cook was breaking off 40-yard touchdown runs, and I won that game because of James Cook. I don't know that James Cook will do that for people this year if he was only scoring 8, 9 touchdowns. Last year, he was the 8th best fantasy running back, scoring 16 touchdowns. 8th.
Right.
That's the ceiling. unless he's going to catch the ball way more than he was going to. For fantasy in the Bills, when someone asks me that, there's only one guy that I say is even worth a flyer at where they're going right now, because Shakir is solid, and like Kincaid has this upside that you could see, but like one reason I don't go for Shakir is I like to go for boom or bust guys, like guys that can win me the title, not just get me 9 points. Who's a guy that might flame out, but he might be getting me 15, 16 a week, and I don't think that's going to be Shakir. He's more steady. The guy that I would try to figure out, and if you like him, this would be the guy to take, is Coleman. Keon Coleman, I guess it depends who you're listening to. And I'll sell this coming up at 7. When we had either Chris Brown or Steve Tasker on at training camp at St. John Fisher, the words inconsistent were mentioned about him at camp. And I think it's really hard to parse what kind of camp a guy like that is having when daily, every other day, a couple times a week at the least, you're seeing plays from him on social media because of his ability to, he is a stylist when it comes to catching the ball. He's gonna have some pretty catches. He's going to jump up in the air. He is going to have a one-handed catch every now and then. He's going to look like a beast jumping up in the air over somebody and catching the football. And I think that can inflate in some people's minds what kind of camp he's having. But I don't know. I think he could also, since, St. John Fisher at least, have been putting it together. Consistent. Every day, every week, getting on the same page with Allen. We saw that one clip in Hard Knocks. I mean, it was like a 5-second clip, so it wasn't much, of Allen telling Coleman, I want you here, not instead of here. I want you to get to this spot. So, there's coaching going on, even from the quarterback, with him about what he wants. Deion Dawkins the other day talking about how Coleman just feels different. Maybe there's a different level of maturity there, and that he's primed for a big season. Because he's the only one that I would, at the moment, consider to have like that. Oh, if I'm going to draft one of these Bills receivers, and it's gonna hit big. Palmer, I don't think hit big. It could be really good, but hit big, like 1,000 yards, double-digit touchdowns. Coleman's the only one, because of the draft status and the talent level that is there. I think that is the argument for Coleman. Upside, youth, second year in the system, matured a little bit more. The role has probably been increased for him. That's all the argument for Coleman. I am so curious to see how it works, though, with him playing in the role that he's playing in, when I wonder if he can really show off what is his best trait. I think it's nice to see, and they're definitely fun videos to look at, him leaping up in the air and making a sick catch in practice or in a game. It happens in games too. Last year, think of the Seattle game going over Tariq Woolen, or the Jet game at the end of the season going up over the Jets defense at the back of the end zone. Those plays are awesome. But they also were inconsistent. His contested catch rate was near the bottom of the league last season. There were drop problems, and some of them were more of the easy ones. There's a goal line slant against Miami here at home where the ball hits him right in the hands and it pops up in the air for an easy interception by Jalen Ramsey. There is a breadbasket play against, I think, the Rams, where Allen puts it in. He doesn't have to put his hands up for it. It's coming in towards his chest, and it hits his arms, and it drops for an incomplete pass. And there were a couple of those. Those breadbasket passes for Coleman ended up hitting the ground a few times, and I bet that was actually the majority of his drops. The thing, though, statistically, that he was best at last year. And there are plays that I remember for this too, were his yards after catch. What he did with the ball in his hands after he had it. There is the Tennessee play where he catches a slant and the defender spins him around, he stays on his feet, and he sprints upfield for 50 yards. The Houston touchdown, kind of a similar play. That one is more to the outside, but stays on his feet, and he runs to the end zone, and that was a huge play in a game where the Bills were totally inefficient, and they needed a play like that. And Coleman didn't do it by jumping over somebody. He did it by catching the ball and then using the skills that had him being a punt returner in college. If you're a punt returner in college, you are able to make people miss. You are able to stay on your feet. You know how to read holes. And that play against Houston was big at the time, and that's how he scored it. And I wonder how much the Bills are ready to use that with Coleman. Part of it is they're, I think, asking him to do so many other things. Mentioned these contested catches down the field, learning how to win routes one-on-one, learning how to beat press coverage because he's going to be dealing with a lot of that, being the physical guy, blocking in the run game. Like, there's a lot on his plate. So is he also going to be a guy that they're going to dump a screen off to, that they're going to run a shallow crosser across the front of Josh Allen and just throw it to him and let him run when they have other guys that do that? Shakir does that. Samuel, if he can ever play, does that.
Do you think him improving those, I don't want to call them easy plays, but expected plays that we're talking about with those drops and those little things, if those get consistent, does that not force them, or not force, but give them the confidence to go, all right, let's get him the ball in his hands.
Yeah.
He's not going to make a silly mistake. He's grown up a little bit, and give him those opportunities a little more?
I would hope so, because it also should make defenses respect his entire game.
Exactly.
Like, that's where, like Gabe Davis visiting this week with the Bills, thinking back on his career, whenever he ran routes down the field or whenever he caught the ball, there was very little that was going to happen after that.
Right.
Davis would catch the ball. It wasn't quite catch the ball and fall down, but very rarely was he going to run away from people or break a tackle, or it was going to be he catches the ball and that's about where it's going to land.
Right.
Coleman, if he catches a 15-yard in route across the middle of the field, he's somebody that I definitely think has a greater capability of catching, if he can get to a place where he's getting open on a route around that level of the field, that he's then going to be able to turn upfield, make one guy miss, and get an extra 20 yards.
I remember Sal telling us about a play exactly what you're describing, early in training camp, where Coleman catches an in route in the kind of spot where Sal thought, oh, he'll get tackled here and get closed on by the safeties, but he planted his foot in the ground and split right between them and got through. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about here, where if that's, not to disparage them, but if that's Davis, he's probably not running that route. And he's probably catching that ball and going right down.
Right.
Or even if he's trying to split those safeties, he's not getting through them. Where Coleman now, it looks like, adds another layer of explosivity to that sort of a play. And that should unlock more opportunity for him and for the offense as a whole. Because his danger, that size, if you can be dangerous on the outside over those classic things we talk about with him, the over-the-shoulder sort of backside fade balls, if you can have that threat, then it makes, and add in a middle split a safety speed sort of threat or power threat and make a guy miss.
Right.
Then you're an all-around, people got to start scheming to make sure you can't make those plays happen. And that's what I think the basis of what we talk about wanting and looking for from that offense and from a receiver, right?
Right.
And so if he can show a little of that and prove to Brady or whoever he needs to prove it to that he's worth enough to, or valuable enough to force the ball into his hands, I think that indicates that we're in a good spot with that, because he needs that. And that offense, I think, in many ways needs that.
Yeah, I think he's got to do all that, and he's got to get, especially like the route running nuances are the thing that I think need to come through for him the most. But you're right, like I still want to stop short of saying I think he could become a complete receiver. I think he could be a useful receiver, and I think he probably always will have a role in the league. He's got certain abilities where even the jump ball part of it, even though it's totally inconsistent and statistically was not good last year, contested catches, you just do watch it and think, he's always going to be in the league. Right. Someone's always going to look at that and think, I can use that. And that's even if you don't see his ability with the ball in his hands. To that, by the way, like one number that I like for that at NFL Next Gen Stats is yards after catch over expectation. Literally, it's the number we use for Cook all the time for rushing yards, but it's just for the receivers. Yak over expectation. And Keon Coleman, amongst all wide receivers in the NFL, over expected, 101 yak yards over expected. That was 12th best in the NFL. The guys above him, Jamar Chase, CeeDee Lamb, A.J. Brown, Puka Nacua, Debo, Zay Flowers, Tyler Johnson, that's the only like weird one in here, Chris Godwin, Brian Thomas Jr., Marvin Mims, and Khalil Shakir. Those are the only 11 receivers above Coleman. And even so Shakir is 3 yards above him in that number. But Shakir's total yards after catch, 618. And Coleman's total yards after catch, 226. Even that. What's more impressive? Shakir getting 600 and 100 of it is over expected. So by expectation, he should have had 500.
Right.
Or Coleman, who had 226 and his expected was 125. Coleman almost doubled what he should have had.
Right.
In that category by running away from people, making a couple of guys miss. He just didn't do it nearly as often.
You just didn't have the same opportunity that Shakir had.
And really all those guys. All those guys above him, except for that one Tyler Johnson, Rams receiver I mentioned. Everybody else, like Jamar Chase at the top. I mean, he's 300 yards over expected, but he had 800 yak yards last year. Jamar Chase did, and he's obviously another animal. All I mean to say is that's a skill of Coleman's, and I just like to give that air sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I think everyone always hyper-focuses on his ability to go above the rim and make a catch. And I think that while that's really cool to look at, I think what's more reliable, I had numbers on this in his college career, how in college, contested catches, it wasn't very efficient, but yak plays, ball in his hands, look at this.
Right.
I think that's his best trait. I think he's really good with the ball in his hands. We have examples of that from last year that we can remember. We have the numbers that back it up. And it doesn't mean that they can't throw jump balls to him anymore. I just think there's a skill in there for Coleman that you just don't hear talked about all that often.
Yeah. And you got to exploit what you've got. You got to learn how to get the most out of the guys you've picked and the guys you've signed. And if there's an opportunity to get more out of him, you got to do it.
Now, to go full circle, because I was telling you about, is there a Bill I would draft in fantasy? He would be the one I would draft, but he's going too high for me. So yeah. I personally won't end up with Coleman. But if you do, I think you that's the guy you wanna go after. You're gonna need some touchdowns too.
Yeah.
What would we take for touchdowns from him? Would you take 7?
I was just thinking 7
would
seems
you take,
like the right number.
You would sign up for 7 touchdowns.
What do you
have last year? 4?
I think 4. I think I would want to hope that he would get more than that.
More than 4?
This year.
He had last year. Yeah, I think he had 4 because Hollins led the team
right with
5, so he didn't have more than that.
Exactly.
I don't know that I would take 7.
I think I would want better than that.
Yeah, I
think I would hope for more.
He's got more in him.
Yeah,
he's got more in him. I would, I'll take 9. 9 would be the fewest that I would actually sign on the dotted line for.
Right.
Where I don't need him to get to double digits, but let me get close to it.